Welcome to this peaceful moment, a place where you can slow down, breathe, and let your body relax. Take a deep breath in and let it go slowly. Feel the tension begin to fade little by little. I'm glad you're here, and if you enjoy this kind of calming content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next sessions. Now, let's begin our journey into relaxation and calm. The shepherd Mahmoud lived on the edge of the village, in a small house made of mud and straw, barely strong enough to withstand the harsh seasons of the year. He owned nothing in this world except a small flock of sheep he had inherited from his father. And he guarded it the way one guards his own heart. And despite his poverty, his heart was spacious, large enough to hold people, animals, birds, and even creatures others feared. That is why people said about him, "He is a kind man, but kindness does not put bread on the table." One day, while he was tending his sheep on the slope of the valley, he noticed an unusual movement near a large rock. He approached cautiously and found a huge snake, long and shiny-skinned, trapped between two prongs of a narrow rock crevice. Almost choking, its mouth was open and its eyes stiff with pain. The shepherd was frightened at first and was about to retreat, but something inside him held him back. He stared at it for a few seconds and murmured to himself, "Even if it's a snake, it's just a creature in distress." He stepped closer, lifted the small rock pressing on its body, then used a wooden trunk to pry the other stone aside until the gap widened enough for the snake to crawl out slowly and free itself. It breathed as if it were a person emerging from drowning. It retreated a few meters and looked at him. He could not tell whether that look was gratitude, a threat, or just an instinctive reaction. But he stood still until it moved away slowly and vanished among the grass. By evening, he had already forgotten the incident, unaware that what he had done would change his fate entirely. Days passed, then weeks. One quiet afternoon, as he was gathering his sheep on a small hill, he heard a faint rustling and felt the strange sense that something was moving around him. He turned, and there it was, the same snake. He was not mistaken. The marks of the stones he had freed it from were still visible on its back. He froze, but the snake showed no aggression. It moved toward him, one slow glide after another, then turned around and began crawling away, pausing only to look back as if signaling him to follow. He whispered, "Do you want me to come with you?" No answer was expected, yet his feet carried him forward. He followed, keeping a distance that felt safe. The snake led him across the valley, over rocks, and into an area he had never entered before, a place dense with trees, like a small abandoned forest. It stopped at the entrance of a gap between two large rocks and raised its head, striking the stone gently with its long tongue. He hesitated, though something within him urged trust. He bent down, clearing the tangled weeds until he uncovered a narrow opening beneath the rocks that led into a small hollow. He tried to see inside and caught a faint glimmer, something metallic. He knelt and reached in, pulling out a handful ancient gold coins. Their engravings unfamiliar, but their shine unmistakable. A hidden treasure lay there, guarded by nature, or perhaps by time. He looked up to find the snake, but it was gone. It had disappeared as quietly as it had appeared. The shepherd returned to his village with trembling hands. He could hardly believe himself. He hid the treasure in sacks inside his house and spent days trying to make sense of what had happened. He dared not tell anyone. People believe only what they touch, and he himself barely believed what he had seen. Change began slowly, as if life were testing him before granting him anything. He repaired his house first, then bought a few new tools. The neighbors wondered, "Strange, where did the shepherd get this money?" He answered none of their questions. Months went by. His flock grew in number. He bought some sheep and sold others, then purchased a small plot of land near the valley and began to cultivate it. The new work was tiring, but Mahmoud felt life opening door after door for him, as if the kindness he had shown that creature had returned to him in the form of what he deserved. People's view of him changed. They came to him for advice and treated him with respect. It wasn't the money alone. It was the calm dignity he had gained without intending to. His kindness, once dismissed, had become a virtue the villagers saw differently when combined with wisdom. As years passed, young men came seeking work with him, and his sheep trade expanded until merchants in the nearby city came to know his name. But Mahmoud remained the same. His heart never changed, nor did he feel superior to anyone. He repeated always, "Good comes back, even if late." One cold night, he sat near his now spacious and warm house, drinking tea by the fire when he heard a faint movement among the trees. He stood, expecting a shepherd or a wild animal, but what he saw was completely unexpected. It was the same snake, or at least one that looked strikingly similar. It approached slowly, stopping at a safe distance. There was no threat and no fear in its eyes, only a kind of silent understanding unlike human speech. The shepherd smiled and took a step forward. He whispered, "Without you, nothing would have changed. Thank you." The snake raised its head slightly, then turned and slipped into the night, as though it had come only to reassure itself that the life it owed to his mercy had not been wasted. And from that day on, he never saw it again. Mahmoud grew older, married, and had children. He taught them that mercy is not weakness, and that what one gives freely will eventually return in ways unimaginable. Sometimes, he would sit under the shade of a tree, telling his grandchildren the story that changed his life, how he saved a dying snake, how it rewarded him by leading him to a treasure he had never dreamt of, and how the years he spent in poverty were merely a prelude to a beautiful patient's life would later reward. But what he never told anyone, the secret he kept to himself, was the look he saw in the snake's eyes the last time, a look that made him believe that goodness is never forgotten, and that nature sometimes preserves for a person what people do not. There are stories the mind understands, but the story the shepherd lived can only be understood by the heart. And one evening, as he watched the sun setting over his vast land and large flock, he said quietly to his wife, "I have never been richer than I am today, not in money, but in what life left inside me." She smiled, asking nothing more. Some stories are lived and told only once. Thus, the poor shepherd became a man whose tale was spoken among people, not because he found treasure, but because he proved that mercy can change destinies, and that goodness, when given purely, never goes to waste. Many years passed after Mahmud had settled and become well known. People knew many things about him, but they did not know the secret behind the complete change in his life. He did not fear revealing it. He simply felt that certain gifts of fate should remain secrets between a person and their creator, or between him and the nature that had returned his kindness in an unusual way. With age, Mahmud began to prefer the quiet hours before dawn. He would wake before everyone, sit outside his house, and watch the stars fade and the faint light of dawn rise over the valley. In those moments, he felt as though he could hear the voice of the earth itself. One day, his middle son, Sami, came to him, a strong and ambitious young man who dreamed of expanding the farm and starting a new business. He said, "Father, I want us to grow, to open a shop in the city. People know our name, and the opportunities are many." Mahmud looked at him for a long moment and said, "My son, expansion is not strength unless the heart is ready for its weight." Sami did not understand, but he smiled respectfully and walked away. Mahmud realized that his children viewed his success as the result of luck or cleverness. They never knew it all began with a very small moment, a moment of saving a snake. He did not wish them to know the exact story, but he wanted them to understand the meaning of doing good with no expectation of reward, and that life is broader than narrow calculations. Then something unexpected happened. A group of sheep disappeared from one of the distant pastures. The area was normally safe, workers were alarmed, and Mahmud himself went to inspect the place. As he walked, he felt something familiar, a sense from years ago, the distinct feeling of a non-human presence near the rocks. He stopped and looked around. Suddenly he saw a shadow sliding among the grass. He stepped forward and saw the snake. It was slightly larger than before, or perhaps time had changed his perception. But it was the same, its eyes holding the same old gleam. It approached him without fear. He felt no fear either. Instead, his heart calmed, as if the meeting had always been waiting for its time. He whispered, "I think I understand. You're here for a reason." The snake moved toward a particular rock. He followed and bent down to look behind it. There he found traces of human footprints, a cut piece of rope, and drag marks on the ground. So, the sheep didn't lose their way. They were stolen. He could have returned and accused someone immediately, but something inside him told him this was no ordinary theft. He followed the snake, which slithered forward as though it knew the path. It led him through the valley, toward a rocky, remote area he had not visited since his youth. Suddenly, it stopped, lifted its head, and flicked its tongue in the air as if catching a scent. Mahmud approached and found a small cave opening hidden among stones and dry brush. He crawled inside and saw a faint light and heard movement. As he went deeper, he spotted two men gathering the stolen sheep, preparing to move them. He didn't know them, but they looked like experienced thieves who knew how to choose remote places. He backed out silently. Outside, he found the snake still waiting as if guarding the entrance. He gazed at it and said with a sorrowful smile, "You didn't want to give me a treasure this time." You only wanted to protect what God gave me." He returned to the village, gathered his sons and workers, and all of them headed together to reclaim the sheep. They managed to seize the thieves after surrounding the cave. Mahmud's children saw something new in him that day, wisdom unlike anything they had known before. It wasn't anger that drove him, nor impulsiveness, but a quiet certainty, as if he knew the path before taking it. After they recovered the flock, Mahmud's reputation grew even more. Though he never told anyone the real story, he said nothing about the snake. It was a secret he wished to keep, between him and something deeper than understanding. Another day came when Mahmud was sitting near the now enormous field. The sun was tilting toward the horizon, and a warm breeze drifted through the trees. He heard a faint movement behind him and turned. The snake stood at a distance. He did not fear. He did not move. He looked at it as if looking at an old friend. "I think our meetings are nearing their end," he said softly. The snake raised its head, then slowly crawled away, disappearing in the grass as it always had. Mahmud felt something within him draw to a close. He no longer needed to see it again. Everything was complete. The kindness he had offered, the blessings he had received, the protection he had been granted, and the lessons he had passed on to his children. Years went by until Mahmud became an old man whose wisdom was admired by everyone. People did not know the source of that wisdom, but they sensed it came from an experience no one else had lived. One quiet night, Mahmud sat under the sky he knew so well, its stars familiar like the lines of his palms. He remembered the snake, the valley, and the day he lifted the stone off a frail creature that might have died. He closed his eyes and thought, how beautiful it is for a person to understand that mercy is not a word, but a small act capable of changing an entire fate. He smiled, finally understanding the story from beginning to end. Thus the tale of the shepherd who saved a snake comes to an end, not because it is a story of gold and treasure, but because it is a story of goodness that returns to its giver. No matter how long the road. Days and years passed, and the story of Mahmud the shepherd became an unwritten legacy, passed softly from one generation to the next, like the whisper of wind between the valley trees. Few knew what truly changed in his heart the moment he reached out to save a creature everyone else would have ignored. But those who truly knew him, those who sat with him on long winter nights and watched his face wrinkle into a calm smile, felt that there was something deep within him, something that neither money nor success could ever create. It was born from an experience that happens only once in a lifetime. As time went on, his land became broader and his children more experienced. But what distinguished it all was not fertility alone, rather, the trace of a kind heart that saw in every strand of wool a blessed provision, and in every grain of soil a memory of a step taken alone at the start of his journey. Sometimes Mahmud sat at the farm's edge under the large cedar tree, the one he had planted himself decades earlier when it was nothing more than a fragile branch barely able to stand against the wind. Now it was tall and massive, shading half the area. He would look at it and smile, saying to himself, "Everything grows with gentleness, trees and people alike." He never told his children that he planted that tree on the very day he found the treasure, as if he wanted to plant a silent memory that would grow with him, a witness to the idea that what comes unexpectedly may vanish unexpectedly, but what is born of mercy never disappears. When his grandchildren gathered around him, asking for the same story they had heard 100 times, he never told it in the same way each time. He rediscovered it, as if he were hearing it anew. They widened their little eyes in amazement when he reached the part about the treasure. But his heart paused at the moment before the treasure, the moment he simply chose to be human, without conditions or expectations. In the final nights of his life, when his body weakened and his steps grew heavy, he sat on a wooden chair near the front door. Looking at the valley, the breeze carried the scent of childhood, the scent of the land he lived upon, and the scent of a past that was poor and harsh, but never cruel. He felt that everything that had happened was not random. It was a long thread, with its first knot tied at the rock where the snake had been trapped, stretching across the years until it made of him a man he had never imagined becoming. On his last night, as silence filled the village and the stars covered the sky, Mahmoud felt his chest soften in a way he had never felt before, as though something inside him whispered that the journey was nearing its end. With each breath, he felt his soul lighten, the burdens of years gradually fading. When he closed his eyes, he saw the snake as it first appeared, small, weak, trapped between the stones. Then he saw it as he saw it last, strong, calm, confident, looking at him as if saying, "The goodness you offered never vanished. It simply returned to you along the path you least expected." He smiled and allowed life to complete its circle. At dawn, his children found his face peaceful, as if he had slept on a beautiful story. The air was cold, the sky clear, and the valley quiet. In the days that followed, his son Sami often sat in the same place where his father had sat. Looking at the quiet expanse before him, he carried a great inheritance, not of wealth or land, but of wisdom and of the moment that changed everything. Though time passed, the tale continued to be told, each generation adding what it understood and what its heart could grasp. Some saw it as a story of treasure, some saw it as a story of survival, some saw it as a miracle. But those who knew the true meaning said, it is the story of a man who understood that mercy is not weakness, and that a kind heart can open doors no amount of cleverness can open. It is the story of a simple shepherd who became a witness to the truth that the smallest act of goodness can change the greatest destiny. And so the tale did not die. It grew, like the old cedar tree, whispering to everyone who heard it. Do good without waiting for its return today or tomorrow, but know that it will return in a way you never imagined. At the moment you are ready, not the moment you expect. And here the tale ends, but its imprint remains, like a footprint on the soil, erased from the surface by the wind, yet never erased from the earth itself.